Okay, great. So I'm Nandini Archer, and I'm the Gender and Identity Editor with Open Democracy, and I'm based in London. So big welcome. We have weekly live discussions at Open Democracy, like the one we're just about to have. And we want this conversation to involve as many of you as possible. So thank you to all of you that submitted your questions and your comments ahead of this panel. So I'm going to try and go through and address as many of them as we can. If you are joining on the Zoom, then you do have a question or comment for us as we're talking. Click in the chat icon at the bottom of your screen and type into the chat window. And people who are watching on Facebook, you can put your questions in the comments there and I will get to them as well. I'll keep an eye out on that too. So this week's topic is it too late to stop the UK police bill? So this, of course, is the one and only controversial police crime sentencing and courts bill, which will increase police and state powers to crack down on protests, and among many other things, which we will get to the bottom of today. So today with us on your screens we've got Belle Ribeiro-Addy, Labour MP for Streatham, who is running slightly late, so she's not on your screen yet, but she will be joining shortly. We've got Becca Hudson, who's a researcher and campaigner on criminal justice issues. And we've got Jake Bowers, who's a Romany journalist and Drive to Survive campaigner. So I will ask each of you a few questions, but do feel free to butt in and respond to something else someone else has said if you want to expand on what they've said, and so on. So I think to start with, I'll go to you, Becca. It'd be good really to begin with to just understand why people should care about this bill. And I think in particular, a lot of audience questions ahead of time were around how there's a lot of discussion around protest law and how this bill impacts on that. But what are there, apart from these specific protest restrictions, what else are you worried about in this new potential legislation?
Absolutely. So thanks so much for having me to Open Democracy, and thanks everyone for being here on your Thursday afternoon. I guess in response to your question, everybody should care about this bill because it affects every single person's ability to protest in our society. Whatever issue might affect you or you might feel passionate about, whether that be now or into the future, your ability to speak up about, organise around and demonstrate your dissatisfaction with anything that this or future governments do, or any kind of injustice in our society, the sorts of restrictions that are in this bill mean that our ability to voice that dissent will be massively reduced. Some of the protest restrictions that already exist in this country are some of the most restrictive in the Western world, and this kind of escalates that to mean that a protest, even of one person, if it's considered to be disruptive, to cause serious annoyance, to create a large amount of noise, police, and this is individual senior police officers, are able to place restrictions on those protests. And anybody who breaches those restrictions, be they about the timing of the protest, the amount of noise that is made, the number of people attending, also where it takes place. So they're trying to set up a buffer zone around Parliament. So even our ability to demonstrate in front of those who govern us will be reduced by this bill. Police officers will be able to put restrictions on those protests. And if you breach those restrictions, be you an organiser or just an attendee of those protests, you can face criminal sanction, you can face fines, and at the most extreme level, as an organiser who breaches those kind of restrictions, you can face a custodial sentence of up to 10 years in prison. So it concerns all of us, and any of us who think that now, in the past or in the future, we might want to attend a protest. We should care about this bill. But it's also much further reaching than that. So it's a really huge piece of legislation. It's over 300 pages long. And it is really a direct attack on many communities outside of just protest as well. So there are provisions within the bill to basically totally criminalise the way of life for many Gypsy, Roma and Traveller people. The group of people that I mostly work with are young people, and there are a huge number of provisions in the bill which are extremely frightening to us, including the expansion of stop and searches, which we already know are used in a systematically racist way. Within this bill, there are provisions to basically allow police to continually stop and search with no reason and no need to demonstrate a reason any young person who they can give what they call a serious violence reduction order to. So that basically means if you're given one of these orders by the court, anytime you're in public space, the police can stop and search you and you can't say anything about it. And if you ask them for a reason, and say, you know, why are you stopping me and this is against my rights and you need to demonstrate suspicion, that could be considered arguably a breach of that very order, that you're even saying you need suspicion, because with this order you're not meant to. It allows people who have kind of authority roles in young people's lives, including teachers, youth workers, and paramedics, to be able to give young people's phones up to the police if the police request it from that authority figure without the young person's consent. It means that on a local level, within local authorities, police will be in control of leading on strategy around youth violence and serious violence in that area, and other essential services will have to answer to the police, including on funding, and answer to the Home Office on what the strategies to deal with violence in that area are, meaning that the kind of group of adults that young people are able to trust gets smaller and smaller and smaller, because at the end of the day, they're all answering to the police, and the threat of criminalisation on young people who are facing violence in their day-to-day lives is just increasing. Another thing I'd just like to mention is that there's huge portions of the bill which introduce new and longer sentences and get rid of automatic early release from people in prison. It's important that we do not forget that in our prisons in this country, around 80,000 people have been in de facto solitary confinement conditions since the beginning of this pandemic. We are already dealing with an incredibly overcrowded, violent and distressing prison system in which many people are really severely harmed and many people die every single year. And just building more prisons and keeping more people in our prisons for even longer periods of time, as this bill promises to do, will only make those conditions worse. So those are just some areas that I know kind of the most about in terms of the work that I do, but the bill is huge and far-reaching, and all of us should be taking a stand against it, not just on the protest level, but on everything that is inside this bill.
Thanks so much, Becca. That was like a really useful overview. And welcome, Belle. I know that you missed just the intro bit, and just to catch you up, I asked Becca basically why we should care about this bill, and I now wanted to ask you. You've been quite vocal against the bill in particular as well. Can I ask why?
Well, this bill's yet another kind of measure in this government's authoritarian drive. There've been a series of bills they put down, and quite disgracefully, a lot of them have been throughout the pandemic, when you'd think that we'd be spending most of our time focusing on issues that touch and concern the pandemic. They've carried on with other pieces of legislation, such as the Spy Cops bill, you may be aware of, and the Overseas Operations bill. All of these things attacking our human rights, and the Police and Crime Sentencing Courts bill is just yet another measure for this. I mean, to think about why they are doing this, over the past year, we've seen what they've done in terms of their management of the pandemic, but not just that, how they continue to flout human rights legislation in this country, how they continue to go down a privatization routes for many of our public services, most notably the NHS, and how they continue to do things to benefit Tory donors and essentially screw over the rest of us. Now, how do you make sure that you can continue to do that without much opposition? You remove the rights that people have to oppose. So removing the rights that we have to oppose, namely our protest rights, removing the rights we have to oppose in terms of legislation that they're putting down to restrict trade unions, and the voter ID legislation that is coming quite soon. Again, removing the right to vote by requiring voter ID from some of the most marginalised groups in the country. So doing all of that is all part and parcel of their method to control things as much as possible, to centralize power in this conservative government, and to make it difficult for us to oppose them. And, you know, as Becca said, there are many different parts of this bill, not just the protest part. Obviously, that's the one that gained the most attention because of what was happening at the time, but there's a lot which targets our minoritized communities. I'm sure Jake's going to speak in more detail about what's happening with the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller community, but we know it specifically persecutes them, criminalizes their way of life. And in terms of policing, it's giving the police powers that they've actually said they don't want. And that's quite scary for the police. And, you know, if you're someone from a background like mine, experiences with the police haven't always necessarily been great. But for the police to actively say they do not want such wide-ranging powers is scary. It's extremely scary. And then to just give them to them, and for them to say, actually, what's going to happen is we're going to end up using them. That's not going to do anything to improve police community relations. It goes completely against this whole idea that we're meant to have of policing by consent. It has nothing to address the historic problems that the police have had with Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities going over decades. In fact, all it will do is criminalize those communities more, not just generally, but thinking about how it relates to the justice system. Now, one of the other things which probably received the least attention in terms of public protest and scrutiny is the secure 16 to 19 academies, which is essentially the expansion of the youth prison estate. Now, another thing that the government will talk generally about the government privatizing things, our prisons have become more and more privatized. And these secure 16 to 19 academies are going to be privatized. And essentially, just like in America, the more people you put in these institutions, the more money these private companies make. They've done a trial run with immigration detention centers, where actually you're seeing more and more people going through immigration detention. And I think as much as 70% of them are eventually released back into the community. So we have indefinite immigration detention. You have as much as 70% of the people going in eventually released, which means that they're being denied their liberty. And for every day they're denied their liberty, these private companies make money. And that's essentially what will happen with this bill, with more and more people being criminalized, with, you know, higher sentences for people from the BAME community, and with more and more young people having their opportunities, stripped away from them. They may have found themselves in an issue with joint enterprise. That's something else which continues in terms of legislation. And these secure 16 to 19 academies are trying to make child prisons sound lovely and wonderful, but all they will be doing is locking young people up for private companies to make profit. So, you know, Becca's absolutely right. Everybody needs to be concerned about this for a wide range of reasons, not least because if we continue to allow them to pass legislation like this, we will enter a situation where we cannot get rid of the Conservative government because they have consolidated all of that power amongst themselves and stripped all of the rights away from us. And it's so bad the way in which they're passing this legislation, giving us really short amounts of time to discuss it, it just blows my mind. It's taken for some of these rights, taken decades for some of us to get the particular rights which are about to be stripped away. And we are having debates in the House of Commons where they're stripping them away in as much as three or 4 hours. So now we've finished the first round in the Commons. The bill is going to the Lords, and the Lords will go through pretty much the same process as us, hopefully putting in more helpful amendments. When the bill first came to second reading, I tabled an amendment which got cross-party to support, which was to remove the entire bill and to just throw it out. Everybody but the Tories supported that, obviously, and it moved to the next stage. What I would say is all of the protests that mounted at the time actually slowed the bill down. They had a momentous effect, and we thought that, you know, they wouldn't be brave enough to bring it around the next time. Unfortunately, there was an incident where they waved it through without taking it to a vote, and that was really awful. So now it's done its third reading. It's going to Lords. I know the same amendments will be put down, and I think we just need to get out and protest again. It's so important. I mean, the reality is them attempting to strip away protests, all that's done is create more protests, and I'm sure that's not something that they're enjoying at the moment. But what stopped it before was that protest, was that mass action, was people contacting their members of parliament explaining that they did not want to see this. So we need to see that same kind of vigor again, and hopefully you know, over the next couple of months, there's probably going to be a break over this over the summer period. Hopefully over the next couple of months we can see some change in terms of this bill. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Bill. And then over to you, Jake. Anything that you'd really like to add? And there's an interesting comment in the chat from Michael Laycock on whether the Roma community have a breach of human rights claim by criminalising their way of life. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely the case. I firmly believe, like Bell, though, that prevention is far better than cure, and anything that would be under, you know, the European Convention on Human Rights may not cure it anyway. It may bring some compensation and some scant relief to people that have been abused by the state, but it won't then stop it being applied to other people. We have to stop this one way or another. Very generally, our democracy is in peril. It's already a very limited democracy. I'm from the Gypsy community. There's about 600,000 of us in this country, and there's never been a single member of us in the Houses of Parliament, ever. So we need to look at big, kind of wide-ranging issues here about the democratic deficit anyway. But Bell's completely right. What they're doing is they are rushing through legislation that will remove any of the kind of the ultimate means of regulating our democracy. One thing that we need to remember is that, you know, that if this becomes law, we will have to break it. We will be morally compelled to break it. We could get bogged down in the kind of a technical discussion about how to try and change it through the Lords and amendments and stuff like that. But let's face the facts. Boris Johnson has an 80-seat stomping majority. There is a convention that even if the Lords bring in amendments to it with a bit of primary legislation that's been put in the manifesto, the convention is that the Lords always backs down. That's my understanding of it. I mean, Bell may have a better understanding of that than me. So I think we're right to be asking, is it too late? I don't think it is too late. And I think what we have to do is we have to look to kind of wider social movements and what they've done in our own country and in others. And remember that law is very rarely an absolute kind of absolutely aligned moral compass. The people who protected Anne Frank were breaking the law. The people who killed her were following the law. So there's a more fundamental question here, I think, which is, if we are not able to stop it through our very limited democratic process, what then do we do? And the answer from the Gypsy and Traveller community is, we live how we have always lived. We live in a way which is outlawed. And in various stages for the last 500 years, we have been outlawed. The only real time when the pressure came off our necks was between 1968 and 1994. Ever since then, the laws have already been very, very strong. And people who live a nomadic form of life in this country are moved on sometimes 3 times a day by existing legislation, the 1994 Criminal Justice and Public Order Act. This piece of legislation for us, as well as horrifically kind of condemning our democracy, it will drive the final nail in the coffin for nomadic life on paper. In reality, a lot of us don't have anywhere to live, and we will persist in existing. We will live our lives anyway. And when freedom is outlawed, only outlaws can be free. And that's a really important point. Sorry, somebody's calling me. I'll just turn that off. That's a really, really important point. And this comes back to the main point of how we stop it. Not is it too late, but how do we stop it? Because we have to stop it. Our culture is under threat. Our democracy is in peril. And we stop it by taking kind of inspiration from the people that we've created statues of in Parliament Square. The suffragettes, the Gandhi and Nelson Mandela. Because our own kind of recent political history in this country shows that it doesn't matter if things are made law. If enough people don't believe in it or support it or obey it, it becomes worthless. Just look at the poll tax. And that's the moment we have to reach in this country for this government. This bill for this government has to become a poll tax moment, which will become the ending and the undoing of Boris Johnson. we're not going to do that just through lobbying. We have to do it on the streets, which is why yesterday we gathered about 500 people on a weekday when most people are working, 500 members of the Gypsy and Traveller community and our allies from the Black Lives Matter movement, from the House of Commons, from the Lords, from Extinction Rebellion, and we brought people out in the streets. Now that is the beginning of a process for us, not the end. And we have the summer to stop this, but we have to come out. We have to take advantage of the ending of lockdown, although of course it's not the ending of a pandemic, to bring our people out into the streets. And if we don't, then we don't stand a chance of stopping it. So I completely agree with Belle. And I've got a 2-minute clip if you want to play it. I can play it now, we can play it later, of what we did yesterday, because for everybody who was there, it was extremely kind of empowering and kind of reminded us that things can be done. In any country, democracy is ultimately because the power rests with the people. And when the people can come out in the streets, then we can do some amazing stuff. So this is just 2.5 minutes, very quickly cut together, of what we did yesterday.
Power rests with the people. It doesn't rest over there with that sorry lot, it rests with us. And when that is the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller community and our allies, we are powerful.
If they attempt to restrict our right to protest, all we are going to do is keep protesting.
Because this is the platform that visibly demonstrates our equality, and from this platform, we can be seen to be activists together from our camps.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry this is happening. You don't deserve this, and you're right to fight it. Keep fighting it.
They want to give people 3-month prison sentences for the crime of having nowhere to live. Pretty Patel says we're biologically criminal. How can you say we're biologically criminal? When you're criminalising us, you're changing the law.
They're not the only ones that can take a vote. They voted to put through the bill. Well, we can take a vote out here. This is a vote of the people. All in favour of a vote of no confidence against this racist government. Put up your hands. Put up your hands.
There is safety and solidarity. So let's stand in that solidarity. Let's fight back at every single point, in the streets, in our workplaces, in Parliament, every other place, against this rotten Tory government, because we can defeat them, and that we will. Thank you so much.
United we stand, divided we fall. And let them know that we are united, and we will stand forever.
And we support each other. For in times of crisis, we put a shout out for whoever's in need, wherever they are. We always find someone from the collective comes to the rescue and provides a solution. It's a great community to be part of.
It is time now for us to feel the strength of a movement, for every trade union leader to say that they will not stand for this. You should be an organised labour to withdraw your labour. It is time for every part of our movement to come together to reject this. It is time for us to remember the words of Tony Benn whenever he said that we are here, our very existence is to effect change. That is our responsibility now, to effect change, and comrades, to demand social justice for our class.
Our government have demonstrated time and time again for the disdain upon the Gypsy race.
So that's just a quick edit which has been thrown together of an amazing event yesterday, and we need to build on that. We need to make it bigger. We need to come together. It's up to us. If it's not, no, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? It's now. We have to do it this summer.
Great, thank you. That was an amazing video. And so following on from that, I'll go back to you, Becca, next. We've got a lot of questions from the audience beforehand about whether anything good had come from this bill already, and like seeing that video and seeing the solidarity, I think that's part of it. So have you been witness to some of this solidarity fighting against the bill?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, as much as the bill is frightening because of its size and the range of communities that it takes a kind of direct attack towards, in that frightening part of it is also our greatest strength and their greatest weakness, because they came for everyone and they came for everyone at the same time. And so there is so much sort of fertile ground there for unlikely alliances and partnerships and solidarity to be formed between all of the different communities who may not necessarily come into contact with each other a great deal, who are all under the umbrella of this bill being attacked, and who all have to fight together to be able to mount a challenge to it and to kill the bill. And I've seen, you know, I think yesterday I was at that demonstration in Parliament Square, and I've seen in the previous protests that took place, there's been many in London, but also across the whole of the country. I know that even just on the 1st of May, there were over 40 events across the whole of the UK, where you had these kind of unlikely alliances. I mean, we know that a huge amount of kind of attention was paid to the bill after the murder of Sarah Everard, and the ensuing police presence and police brutality at the vigil, kind of commemorating and remembering Sarah Everard. And, you know, we saw there lots of different kind of women's and feminist organisations building alliances then with Black youth organisations who are dealing with the stop and search elements and the secure academies that Belle talked about, which are threatened in this bill, building solidarity then with the GRT communities. And so there's a massive kind of untapped potential. We've seen some of those sorts of relationships and alliances built, but there's still, if we're going to defeat it, and I completely agree with Jake that we can't only have our focus on Parliament and that we have to kind of just shrug our shoulders and walk away once it passes, be it in the House of Commons or the House of Lords, to make the bill unenforceable in the same way that people did with the poll tax, in the same way that people did with the SUS laws in our very recent history in this country. That requires us to continue to build those relationships with depth and with an ongoing commitment. And I really implore everybody here not only to attend the demonstration that might be happening to you locally, which absolutely do that, but if you're not able to attend demonstrations for whatever reason, or even if you are but you want to do something else, find your local police monitoring group, find your local youth group, find a local GRT organisation that you can donate some time to, start to build those relationships with, because it's only through that kind of unbreakable solidarity that we're going to be able to kill the bill, particularly to make sure that we kill the entirety of the bill rather than have them pick off different elements. And once one sort of sector has got their demands, for example, say some of the protest restrictions get a little bit diluted, that then all of the rest of us walk away, and it's okay that they carry on with the stop and search and secure academies and increases in sentences and criminalising the GRT way of life. Absolutely not. We break it together, we kill the bill together, and we have to do that till the very end. We leave no one behind, and that really is incumbent upon us to build those relationships now.
Great, thank you. That's a great call to action. And in fact, this is a really interesting point, and again came up in the audience questions beforehand. I wonder whether, and this goes to any of you three that feels moved to answer it, is whether you could speak more about what we can actually do in practice to make it impossible to apply.
I mean, it comes back to those good old principles of collective action. We need to not be kind of seduced by thinking that just because we're meeting online that we're making an effect. We are physical beings and we need to take physical action. And we need to, you know, kind of ensure that the protests that we do are meaningful and disruptive. If you have a look at the history of powerful social movements that have changed things, they were done by being highly, highly disruptive. And you can study anyone you want. The suffragettes, the Indian independence movement, Martin Luther King. We have to hit society where it hurts. We have to remember that one of the reasons that these things have come in is a backhanded compliment to Black Lives Matter and Extinction Rebellion, because they closed places down. And that's what they're frightened of. They're terrified of the people. They're terrified of true democracy. And true democracy has to be fought on the streets. We can do loads of stuff on social media and we can do loads of stuff online, and that helps build awareness and stuff like that. But sooner or later, you got to put your boots on, you got to get your placards on, you got to go out, you got to chain yourself to stuff, bike lock yourself to stuff. You've got to make it, you know, impossible for society to function. But we have to be strategic about it. And we should be gathering that and practicing that over the summer, during the silly season, when the media is looking for stuff to report, when the politicians and most of them are on very nice long summer holidays. But also when Parliament comes back, we need to be there at the state opening of Parliament to show them who's really boss. We need to have the people there. We need to be at the Conservative Party conference. We have to do some mileage. And we have to use everything that we have at our disposal. One thing I said at the rally yesterday is 600,000 gypsies and travellers. We have an enormous amount of cars, caravans, horses and people. We have to get them out. And we can get some of them out. Can't get all of them out because some people are cynical, and apathy is our biggest enemy. But we have to get everybody out who is affected by this. We have to work with people like the People's Assembly. We have to coordinate this stuff. We have to make sure that we come out into the streets, and it's a great laugh. And if there's enough people, it's not a problem. It only becomes problematic if you're small in numbers. So we have to be big in numbers.
Great, thank you.
I was actually hoping to see all the caravans parked up on the green yesterday.
It's coming. All I can say is it's coming. Part of the conditions, look, we started nice and softly because we wanted to show that we're dignified, peaceful people. And part of the conditions in our damaged democracy is that you're not allowed any vehicles or any animals on that square. But we brought one, and we brought one horse, and that's the beginning. We have to get all kinds of vehicles in all kinds of places. Our culture, which is so based upon the car, is extremely vulnerable to people putting their handbrakes on. We have to lock down London. We have to join with Extinction Rebellion, who on August the 21st are going to lock down London. We have to do that. And we have to have a lot of fun doing it. We've got to bring sound systems. We've got to bring drums. We've got to bring trumpets. We've got to dance to a flamenco rhythm and just have a lot of fun doing it. And we need to support Extinction Rebellion at the end of August to do that. We came peacefully and quietly and in a very dignified way yesterday to show that we're capable of it. But when we come back, it won't be so quiet.
Thank you. And I see a question from Joe White in the chat. When will it be coming back to the Lords? What are the timelines basically in order to organise a protest? I wonder if you could explain that again, Belle?
Well, we're not sure of the exact dates yet, but as soon as we have them, we will let the movement know. Unfortunately, because they know this, they will delay letting us know. But we will let the movement know as soon as we have them, just so that everybody is ready. And I think Jake and Becca are absolutely right. This fight isn't going to be won in Parliament; it's going to be won on the streets. But in order to do what we do in Parliament, those of us that are on the right side, we need that strength outside. 100%.
Yeah. I'm just looking at some of the chat. It's the 21st of August that Extinction Rebellion are organising to shut down London. We need to, when we do find out when the state open of Parliament is, we need to stop it being open. We need to stop Queen Liz from getting there in her carriage. We need to stop those things. We need to do those things. And, you know, they will react. They will react with force. But if you get enough people, they won't bother. So this is our Ceausescu moment, you know, and our poll tax moment, and we have to rise to the challenge.
If I can just add to what Jake and Belle have said, I think obviously the timing of this, it's important for us to pay attention, even though we know that they're playing games with the timing of it. And that original delay that was forced by a lot of protesting that Sisters Uncut did over a short and very, very active week was part of their kind of trying to obfuscate by changing the timings, right? But again, I think you can start mobilising for a protest that you don't know the date of now, and that's by contacting your local youth organisation, speaking to people in the street where you live, speaking to people in whatever kind of community organisations you might have contact with or be a part of. Even if you don't think of them as spaces which are explicitly political, speak to the people who you're in contact with on a day-to-day basis, and start thinking about the way in which you can mobilise in a longer term way in your area against the effect of the bill, should it pass. And also you can start galvanizing those people so that you do get numbers on the street when something does get called in a short period of time. But those sort of seeds are grown now. And as much as we might know, you know, we see a large protest that sort of pops up out of nowhere, but a lot of the time the people who've been mobilized to turn up to that place is many, many years of relationship building and lots of time spent sowing those seeds so that those people did come on that day eventually. So I would say don't despair, but also don't wait, because we can start working on it now.
I just saw another thing in the chat, stopping the Queen. Not sure about that. Surely that will create a huge backlash. Listen, I'm not saying for any moment that we should be nasty to somebody in their 90s. Personally, as a Republican, I think it's high time that she retired anyway. But if they are going to use their pomp and pageantry and their horsepower to put a veneer of respectability across a creeping fascism, then we have to meet it with our own horsepower and our own people power, and stop that gilded carriage coming to give it some form of rubber stamp and respectability. It has none in my eye. The moment I read this law and realized that it was out to try and destroy me and my culture, I became enraged, but I also became free, because I realized, you know, you're coming for me, you're coming for my family, and once you do, my back is in the corner and I have no option but to fight.
Thank you. Okay, I'm looking through some of the other questions. One of them was, so moving on a bit, Adam in the audience asked whether the fact that this government has got consistently more authoritarian, but is basically still favoured by the public, how is this? Any answers?
I'm at a loss. I'm not going to lie. I really do not understand it. Obviously, I think it's for the past few years we've gone down this road, especially since the Brexit debate, and regardless of which side people were on, it started a very toxic way of doing politics. And I think that's kind of changed how we talk about things, how we discuss things. And in that way, I suppose, how people are engaging with politics as well. So I don't necessarily think that they have that much support. I just think a lot of people are really fed up with what's happening, and so are not engaging. It's created a sense of apathy. Certainly the Black Lives Matter movement, the Extinction Rebellion movement, all of the Kill the Bill movement that was built up recently around the bill has shown that there are a lot of people who may not necessarily engage in a democratic process, but do hate what this government's doing and are willing to stand up against it, but they're not always reflected in our votes. And that definitely does make a massive difference. I think some people have been upset about the Labour Party, definitely. That has definitely made a change, and at times people may have made protest votes or no votes at all, which then actually shows a different percentage in terms of how the government is actually, well, who is actually elected in different areas, and then who ends up being the elected representative, and how many elected representatives end up showing up in Parliament. But let us remember that the Conservatives, I think, got less than 40% of the vote overall in order to be the government of the day, and that quite a significant number of people in this country didn't vote at all. And imagine how much worse that will be when more and more people are restricted by being criminalized. And actually more and more people are restricted when they put down this voter ID bill, which will remove a lot of the most marginalized groups from being able to vote. So it makes a massive difference in terms of our numbers, whether or not people get involved in the democratic process. We do need to give people something to campaign around, something to campaign for, something to make them feel like their vote is making a difference. And unfortunately, our current democracy makes it feel to many people like that's not the case.
I think that's the key point, actually, Belle. I think that people need to remember that we live in a country which has a progressive majority. You know, if only 40% of people, and those are only the people who voted for the Tories, that actually leaves the rest of us who either didn't vote or voted for far more progressive parties, the Labour Party, the Green Party. But we also need to bear in mind that we live in a broken democracy. It takes almost a million votes to get a Green MP, a lot less for a Labour MP, and even less for a Tory MP, because the system is rigged. So we have to call out the fact that the system is rigged, and we have to have a process of democratic renewal. And that can only ever happen through protests. It's the only way it has ever happened. I just see in the chat, actually, somebody's done their research far better than I have, and it says, yes, it is August the 23rd for Extinction Rebellion. We need to come out. We need to support them. For the Gypsy community, and we consider ourselves the kind of the canary in the coal mine of liberty. We're organising through a grassroots campaign called Drive to Survive. So it's drive survive.org.uk. Anything that we organise will be put up there. We're encouraging everybody to come up to Appleby Fair in Cumbria, where we're going to hold a council of elders of all the Romany families, all the different tribes of nomads in this country, and we will make our own judgment on how we will respond to Priti Patel. We are children of India. Our ancestors came from India. The Romani language that I speak is very similar to Sanskrit. We consider Priti Patel a cousin of ours that's gone wrong, and we need to rein her in. And that's exactly what we will be doing. And we'll be doing it at Appleby Fair. That's on August the 12th. We are encouraging everybody to come up there. What will come out of it, I don't know, because it has to be democratic and it has to be direct democracy from people in the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller community. So I'm not going to try and prejudge it, but I'm hoping that this is our civil rights moment. For a long time, we've held onto the coattails of Black and Asian communities, and I think on this one we need to start taking the lead.
Thank you. Okay, so I've got like a really specific question here from Richard Fowler in the audience, who asked, my MP is Victoria Atkins handling the bill. Any ideas, please, on what he can do to, I guess, lobby his local MP?
Well, I think it's about showing numbers. Now, most MPs will be unhappy about me saying this. A lot of MPs are concerned more about who they think votes for them, definitely. And it's about showing those numbers in their inbox. Some MPs won't respond on certain issues unless they've got a lot of people writing to them. And they need to be clear that these individuals writing to them are actually their constituents and do actually affect whether or not they're re-elected at the next general election. So that certainly needs to be the case. If they have any inclination that people writing to them are not their representatives, they have, they generally ignore them. If the numbers aren't enough, they do as well, because they think, well, this isn't going to affect my majority. Shrugs, move on. Let me keep my position.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we're going to start wrapping up now. But before we do, it'd be good to know, final words from people. Becca, how are you feeling, and what would be your one message that you want to leave people with today?
Thank you. I think I'm feeling apprehensive because it's a real threat. I don't want to sugarcoat the extent to which the bill is a really serious threat to a huge number of people, and as has been discussed a lot today about the kind of how our democracy operates and what kind of a society we get to live in as a whole. I think my main message is just to get out there and get organised. I think, in answer kind of to the previous question about why, despite the escalating authoritarianism of this government, they continue to enjoy such popular support. And although I very much agree that popular support in the way our political system works is only ever partial, I think partly it's because people are fed up, but also what is the alternative and who's showing and giving an alternative that people feel that they can be a part of, that they want to fight for. People who dislike the way that their lives might be in lots of different ways, if there's not a different path forged for them and with them, then where do people have to turn? Either to apathy or to kind of the sort of cheap shots that a Boris Johnson government might offer to them. And that includes things like this bill. The bill scapegoats people. And there are, make no mistake, lots of people in this country who would be quite willing to have the sorts of crises and social and economic problems that we have going on in this country that have been escalated by coronavirus dealt with just through criminal justice. People who are unemployed, people who are homeless, people who are struggling, just warehouse them in prisons, right? And that if you present people with that sort of politics as the only kind of solution to struggles they have in their communities and then in their lives, then that's what, you know, likely many people will go for, and they'll see it as the only solution available. So I think it is about protest. I think it is about, you know, those volumes of emails to your representatives, volumes of people on the streets at key moments in key places, both in time and in space, that you're able to kind of intervene and demonstrate really serious pressure against this bill. But it's also about trying to build those longer term relationships and get organised and contribute in any way you can to the small grassroots campaigns that are happening every day. If there isn't one local to you, then start one, which means that the issue becomes a headline issue in your area, in your community, and it doesn't go away. And when we network up all of those sorts of efforts on a national scale, we can really mount serious challenge to this bill, whether that's in the Lords and we're backing up people who are lobbying Lords, or whether that's the bill being passed and we're making it unenforceable in our day-to-day lives. It requires that we dedicate time and we build those relationships to just make it unworkable, be it before it becomes law or after.
Thank you. And next to you, Jake, any final thoughts? And also in the meantime, thinking about Amy Stansfield's question, which is the support for the government due to the prevalence of the right-wing media and its huge influence, and should they also be a target?
Yeah, they should absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things to remember about the Sun and the Daily Mail, but the Sun in particular, is not a profit-making enterprise. It's a loss. So what's it there for? It's there to tell people what to think, and too many of us are told what to think, and we believe that. And so it is worth making them a target, but I think we can be a bit smarter than that. I mean, and the question underneath that Craig says, I think is actually right, that it is time for a progressive alliance. If Labour, Lib Dems, SNP and Plaid Cymru started fighting each other, then this government would be swept from power. We need to hack the system. It's not broken. It needs a reset. And the reset that is required is for people in the progressive majority that there is in this country to start working more cleverly together, to stop being so tribal. You know, I mean, I love lots of people in the Labour Party, and I was a Labour Party member. And, you know, this is probably a discussion for another day, but we have to face the fact that because the SNP is so strong in Scotland, the chances of a majority Labour government are probably receding. So the only way we can get a progressive majority is for people from those progressive forms of politics to work together. That's the only way we're going to be able to come together to press the reset button. But it needs to be protest movements that press the reset button.
Thanks, Jake. Yeah, very, very clear message there of protest movements. And any final thoughts from you, Belle?
And just to say, we are under threat in the worst way possible, and it's not just this. So you might have seen me typing along whilst we were talking, because we've got a freedom of speech bill coming up, and we know from the Tories' point of view what that means. We've got a health and social care bill coming up, which will privatise the NHS, and we've got an immigration bill which will further reduce the human rights of asylum seekers and extend a hostile environment. And they're trying to squeeze all of this in the last 2 weeks of Parliament. It is unheard of, and it's a complete onslaught. But we have to remain vigilant. We have to keep on fighting, and we have to not let up. Every single one of these gains that they're attempting to strip away from us in terms of our liberties has been won through sustained action, sustained protests, sustained campaigning. We can't come out just one day and I think, as Jake said earlier, oh no, we lost there, so let's turn around. We have to keep the momentum up. It's going to take a lot of energy, but as history has taught us, we always win when we do it like this. So just to encourage everybody, yes, things are bad now, but we know that people have power in their numbers. We have to be united, and we have to come around these issues, and we have to make sure that we winning the argument out on the streets, so that those of us that are in Parliament can continue push it through there. And eventually, whilst we see off all of these terrible attacks on our democracies, we hope to see off this government, which is probably the worst. It's been the worst in my lifetime. And that's saying a lot, because Thatcher was Prime Minister when I was born. Yeah, so yeah, the worst in my lifetime, definitely.
Thank you. And I don't want to leave Christine Wilson's question hanging. So how involved are the unions in this movement, if anyone can answer that quickly?
I mean, certainly they've been very supportive of us. Unite has been very supportive of us through the People's Assembly, been extremely supportive of us. So that the unions are involved. You know, the union, the very word union is, you know, is how you enshrine collective action. I'm sure that they could be doing more. I'm sure there are lots of unions that could be doing a lot more. But when it comes to Unite, they've been very supportive of us.
I'll just add on to that. I know that just from some of the earlier Kill the Bill protests in April and May, that a lot of the other unions, I know that IWGB, for example, United Voices of the World, UCU, as well as Unite, there were others as well who, you know, were supportive and active. But I think, you know, as has been said throughout this whole discussion, it's like it takes all of us, and it's all of our workplaces, and it's all of our communities, and certainly building up that pressure, and yeah, just giving that serious opposition, because we know that when that swells up from our workplaces, our communities, and the streets, it ricochets in Parliament, and it has those effects.
Thank you. And Richard Langworthy, I think that sounds like a great idea. So if you set one up, I'm sure that it will raise money. So I'm sorry, though, I do have to wrap up now. Thank you so much for everyone who joined us, to our panelists and to our audience as well. Thank you, Belle, Becca and Jake, for taking the time out of your day to talk about this issue. And I'm sure you can find them all on Twitter, and there were lots of useful articles and so on in the chat. So we do have a weekly debate, and you can check our website and social media. And my colleagues will put some links in the chat too, to our weekly newsletter and so on. Open Democracy does rely on contributions and donations. So if you want to see more public interest journalism like this, please do consider supporting us. And thank you again. So hopefully see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.